Okay. So we're good. So they're both on live.
They are both on. We're here.
Okay, so we're gonna live deep dive on the Little Ripper Sawmill. I know this is a much anticipated live deep dive, but yeah, so we'll hang out here just for a couple minutes, and we'll get going here promptly at 12 o'clock. Can you see the time on those phones, or you can't?
I can see it. It's 11:57 right now.
So we got all
3 minutes.
Anyway, but yeah, okay. Let me just double check something here.
Got a couple people joining in. Yeah. Awesome. Hi, everybody. Thanks for joining in. We're losing our connection on. Oh, there we go. On YouTube, it's kind of going in and out here.
Okay, let me just double check the Wi-Fi network. Make sure it's on the right one here.
Kind of is.
Okay.
You might go in and out a little.
We might just go in and out a little. I'm not sure how to do that, but that'll be fine.
All right.
Hopefully the internet's good enough today to do this. But what time we got?
You've got 2 minutes still.
Yeah, 2 minutes, yeah. Okay. So yeah, so I got my Raycon bandsaw here. We're going to be doing the live deep dive on the Little Ripper, talking about how it works and why it works. And the main idea, and I'll reiterate this a few times, has an equals option. Type it in the message. I know Jill's going to be watching the phones for these. This is a great thing to watch. Or if you're interested in learning a little bit more about it, that's what we'll get into here. Been learning a little bit more about it. That's what we'll get into here in about 30 seconds.
Yeah, and I'm just going to say to anybody watching on YouTube, if for some reason you are having issues, if it keeps cutting out, our Instagram live seems to be working fine, so you can go check it out. Yeah, no, it did it again while you were talking. So yeah, so if you're having any issues, if it keeps doing that, feel free to go watch it on Instagram as well. It's live there too.
Cool. Are we getting close to noon now? Or?
We are on 12 o'clock, right on the dot.
All right, so let's get into it. So yeah, today we're going to be focusing on the Little Ripper Sawmill. What I have on top of my saw right now is the basic package. So that's a Little Ripper. That's what this product is called right here. I have it on my track, the all track, and it is sliding back and forth on my bandsaw. Now, when we originally designed this Little Ripper, we originally designed it to cut logs, like firewood-sized logs, like I have right here. Now, it does an excellent job of that, and I'll make a couple of cuts here and kind of show you how it works here. Now, these claws, they go up and down like this, and that's what's allowing them to grip on the wood here. So we'll lock that in place. And let me just make a quick cut and kind of show you how this all works. This is literally, excuse me, a piece of wood from my firewood pile. I have no idea what kind of wood it is, but once we get into it, we'll have a better idea here. All right. All right, so if we look at that piece of wood right there, I'm cutting that pretty accurately here. Now the other thing to note about that, so it's not a very even grain pattern at all here, but you see I'm still cutting very, very straight. If I had to guess, this is could be a piece of maple or box elder, though I'm not 100% sure. But it's still a pretty piece of wood here. Now, a lot of people want to know what I've done to the saw to make my saw cut so straight. And that has a lot to do with the process of the little ripper here. It's nothing to do with the saw or the guides or the blade or the teeth or the setup. There's one thing that's happening here that's totally different. And that's the way I'm pushing the wood through the saw here. The way I'm touching that blade here. Now, most guys, when we're cutting on a bandsaw, we're going to use a fence. Now, the thing about wood, we all know this, but it has a tendency to want to stress. It may open, it may close, it may twist as you're cutting. Now, when that wood begins to stress, and I'm cutting that against my fence here, it's going to push into the blade. It's going to bind the blade. And when you bind the blade on a table saw, you get kickback. That's why table saws behind the blade here, they have a little splitter. Now a bandsaw, obviously you don't have a splitter. A bandsaw, when I start to bind the blade, I just kind of bend it. Now the problem with that, the way, excuse me, I better get a glass of water, but the way a bandsaw blade is designed, you got teeth on the front like that. When I put pressure on one side of my blade more than the other, I make this side of the blade a little bit duller, and that blade wants to cut better the opposite way. So what I'm doing here totally different. I'm only putting pressure on the front of the teeth. I'm never putting any side pressure in the blade. Therefore, I'm never going to get drift. Now, I'm going to do something bad here. I'm not telling you guys to do this, but I just want to kind of show this here. I'm going to get rid of my guides here up top. Let me just take them off. Now, when you set these guides up on a bandsaw, we're supposed to set these guides up just a little bit away, just so they don't quite touch the blade. Now, if I'm cutting perfectly straight, something to think about here, that blade, it's not moving side to side, right? It's cutting straight. So here's what I know. If I make a bearing up here spin, as I'm cutting, and that bearing's set just a little bit away from the blade, I know that that blade isn't cutting perfectly straight. It's moving to one side or the other. These guides, they don't determine how straight that blade's going to cut. Those guides are on there when that blade is no longer cutting straight. So just something to think about here. I've already got quite low tension. We'll lower that just a little bit more. Okay. And we'll make a cut here. Now, if I were to cut this piece of wood right now with a fence, you guys know what would happen, but just watch what kind of happens here with a blade, low tension, no guides, cutting a piece of hardwood here through a crotch as well. So that right there is my finished product. So that cuts every bit as straight, every bit as accurate as before. Still a beautiful little veneer. Now, that's the really cool thing about the Little Ripper. It's the only thing that you can get for a bandsaw that no matter how poorly you set your bandsaw up, you're going to be cutting perfectly straight every single time. So again, if anybody has questions, please let me know. At any time here, Jill will let me know if there's a question. But as I said at the beginning here, we originally designed a Little Ripper to cut logs and firewood-sized pieces. But what we realized, or really quickly after we started selling it, is how accurate it cut. That's a really important thing to woodworkers. The vast majority of woodworkers that buy the Little Ripper are not necessarily buying it to cut logs, which is a really cool feature. The vast majority of people are buying it to cut a board, something like this, and they want to make that board into 2 or 3 or 4 pieces. They want to resaw that board. Now, if you want to clamp a board like this into the Little Ripper, it's very, very easy. If you look at the bottom of the Little Ripper here, each claw on the bottom is about 3/8 of an inch apart. So if I go 1 claw back at the front, 1 claw back at the back, that's going to get me somewhat close to parallel with my blade here. But because I know my blade's not drifting, what I'll do next is I'm going to use my blade to line up the outside face right here. Right here, we'll line it up straight with my blade, as straight as I can get it. Lock that up. This is a piece of oak here I have. And same thing in the back. Right about there. Lock that in place. Now there's no guarantee my very first cut is going to be perfectly parallel to that outside face, but every cut after my first cut will be parallel. So essentially what I do here is I'm just making a setup cut. Again, this is a piece of oak here, so let me make my first cut. We'll just take a little bit off the outside to get us started here. Excuse me. So now that I made that first cut, every cut after my first cut here will be perfectly parallel, though that's pretty good anyway there. But if I wanted to rip that down the middle, I easily could do that. Now, if I wanted to get repetitive cuts, that's a very common question. The way I do that is really simple. I get myself a block of wood. I should have grabbed this one. Say you want to cut a whole bunch of 1/8 inch slices, you mark your board right here at about 1/8 of an inch. You line your mark up to your blade. You get a stop block and you clamp that block to your table right there. And you make your cut, piece will fall off, you slide in, make another cut, slide in, make another cut, slide in, make another cut. So you can do repetitive cuts that way. We also have a product called the Micromag Stop Block, which is a stop block that's magnetic. But the main interesting thing about it is totally micro adjustable. So you can dial in your cut by the few thousandths if you need to get some really accurate pieces, if you're a luthier or a segmented turner or what have you. Is the YouTube upload?
It's still doing good. Yeah,
okay,
we're still on.
So again, any questions at all, please let me know. What I'll do next is I'm going to kind of talk about how the Little Ripper mounts to the bandsaw here. So the Little Ripper itself looks just like that. It goes in our all track and slides back and forth. Now the all track mounts a couple different ways. This is a Rikon 10-326. On the Rikon, on the front of it, you have a round rail on the front. If you have a Laguna, if you have some of the newer Jets or older Delta, you have a rail that looks very similar to that. And we machine a block that looks like that, different sizes for different bandsaws. But that will utilize the fence rail that's on your bandsaw and slide just like your fence would along there. Now, if you do not have a round rail on your bandsaw, we have what we call the universal table. Now, that's what this is over here. Now, the universal table, you got a black rail here, black rail here. That's going to allow the track to slide perpendicular. Oh, I got it locked up over here. I got my lock on the wrong side. That'll slide back and forth like that. And on the bottom, I have a lock right here that will lock it to our bandsaw table. That'll keep it from sliding. So the universal table will fit literally every bandsaw on the market as long as it doesn't have a round rail on it. If it does have a round rail, we have the system here to do that. Now, the other limitations of the Little Ripper, one is the height. Right now, I can hold about 7 inches tall. If I want to do taller, there is a height extension available that will bolt to the back. I have it right here. Basically, that will add slots to the back, and that will allow you to go all the way from nothing all the way up to 14 inches tall. So if you have a regular bandsaw, there is a height extension available for it. The other would be the length. Now, on this track, we got dovetailed slots in the bottom here. The neat thing about that, if I got an additional piece of track, we use dovetailed joiners that you probably see there. So I can join these tracks together and I can make it literally as long as I want. So if I put the joint right in the middle of my table, that's going to give me even in feed and even out feed. With the basic system, you can cut about 2 feet long. If you add one piece of track, you can cut about 4 feet long. If you want to go beyond 4 feet, you need more than one Little Ripper. That's what we call the Sawmill setup, which you'll see on our site there. Now, all the Little Ripper kits right now are 10% off on our website, so it's a really good deal. It's also free shipping anywhere in Canada or the US. We make all the parts ourselves, all made in Canada here. The only thing we don't make ourselves here locally is the track, which is made in Windsor, about 4 hours from us, also here in Southern Ontario. But yeah, all the machining and powder coating is all done here in Niagara. So very 100% Canadian made product. The only thing that's not made in Canada would be like the springs and the nuts and the knobs. They're made in the States. But beyond that, all the other parts are made in Canada. And we do make them to fit every single bandsaw. Yeah, so like I said before, it's a really neat jig for cutting logs, but that's not really why people are excited about it. The vast majority of people that are buying it, they're buying it to resaw, something like that, because it's the only thing you can get for a bandsaw. No matter how poorly you set that bandsaw up, you're guaranteed to cut straight every time, regardless, which is quite cool. So again, any questions at all? How are we doing on time?
You're at 12:16 right now.
12:16, so we got a fair amount
You
of time.
got a fair amount of time, and I don't have any questions yet, but if anyone has any
fine.
questions.
That's totally fine. Maybe what I'll talk about a little bit here is proper setup on the bandsaw. I've done everything wrong here, but if you are setting up your bandsaw properly, a couple things I'll go through. And these are where, if you do have a Little Ripper already, and you find your Little Ripper isn't cutting straight, I get this question every now and then. There's basically only ever one reason that the Little Ripper, you're getting drift with the Little Ripper, and that reason, every single time, has to do with the blade. The blade is always the culprit for the blade drift, but there are different reasons that blade may be drifting. Now, the reason it is drifting is because the set is uneven, but there's different reasons that set could have come uneven. Now, one might be you're cutting something with bark on it. There's a a nail or a screw or a rock in the bark that you don't realize. If you're cutting something like that, a woodworking blade, basically you're going to damage the set and you'll need to change a blade. But other things to consider here, if you have an old blade on there and you go ahead and throw this little ripper on there, I don't want guys to think that the little ripper eliminates blade drift. The way you got to look at it is it prevents blade drift. So if you already have a bandsaw blade that drifts, this isn't going to fix it. What you got to do with little ripper, you got to start with a fresh blade right out of the package, and a little ripper will prevent the woodworker from ever putting drift into the blade, provided you have the bandsaw set up fairly properly. Now, that's the other thing that can happen, and it's happened to me before. If you don't have your guides set up quite right, you can actually damage the blade fairly easy with the guides. The biggest thing that you're the damage almost always comes from these side guides. So I don't know if you can see this, Julian, but on the side, you want these side guides to be set behind the teeth, behind the gullet of the blade, just a little bit back. Now, if you have it too far forward and these side guides hit the actual teeth that are bent out, it'll flatten them and that blade won't cut very straight. So you always want the side guides behind. Now, that being said, there's a thrust bearing on the back here as well. You should have that thrust bearing set. That's this bearing right here. It's a little bit hard to see, right behind the blade. We need to have that thrust bearing set about a paper thickness away from the back of the blade. If I have that set like 1/8 of an inch back, what will happen is as I start cutting, that blade will be pushed back into my thrust bearing. And when that gets pushed back into my thrust bearing, these side guides then will flatten those teeth. And the one bearing that is always the culprit is the thrust bearing on the bottom. You don't look at it very often. It's hard to get at, hard to see, but that's where you got to pay attention. If you're wrecking a blade due to the setup, it's probably because of that bearing on the bottom there. So before you get started, just take a good look at how you have your guides set up, because it's not very difficult to wreck a blade just with the guides. So yeah, as long as you have the guides set up so they're not going to wreck the teeth, this little ripper is going to cut straight until that blade is completely dull. And the other interesting thing is, even when that blade is dull, like if I'm at a wood show and using that blade, cutting stuff like this all 3 days, by the end of the weekend, on Sunday afternoon, my blade is getting very dull. And if you come to my booth, it would just be screaming getting through there. But even though that blade's dull, it's dull equally on both sides. So I'm still getting very, very accurate cuts, even with a dull blade. But the thing you gotta worry about with a blade is uneven set or dull on one side more than the other. And when I bind with a fence, I'm gonna dull one side more than the other. If I freehand twist that blade back and forth, I dull one side more than the other. Little ripper, stress in the wood, opens up, does whatever the heck it wants to do. And on this side, it's locked in place. Basically, never gonna bind the blade, never gonna make one side of the blade sharper than the other, never gonna drift. It's pretty simple. So yeah, it's a really quite a neat little jig. It is on sale, 10% off for the weekend anyway, until Monday. But again, any other questions, feel free to ask them. And if you have questions after the live, you can send me an email at info@stockandsupply.com, and I'd be thrilled to answer them here. So we'll probably, if there is no other questions, I'll probably close her off here quite soon. But I do appreciate you guys watching. Super great. And yeah, thank you guys so much. Thank you, Jillian, for filming. I really appreciate it. And yeah, we'll close her down now. But yeah, you got
just a reminder that they're Black Friday sales.
Oh yeah,
too.
We have other Black Friday sales, like the trend mask is on sale, 25% off. Carving set, $60 off. All the record power stuff is on sale as well. Basically 10 to 20% off all their wood churning stuff, and their canvas are also on special, which is what I was using here in the demo. So yeah, make sure you check them out on our website. That'd be cool.
Perfect.
All right, let's enter there, and I'll take that, and then we can.
Sounds good.
We can end that off. Okay, oh, there's the X button there.